Now, man likes to think of himself as the caretaker of nature and the world. It is closer to the truth, however, to say that in that regard at least, nature is man's caretaker, or that man exists, physically speaking, as the result of the graceful support of nature and all of its other species. Without those other species, man, as you know him, would not exist, not without the continuous cooperation of those species with each other and their interrelationships with the environment. Man serves his purposes within nature, as all species do. In terms of your understanding, man thinks in his own way, but he is also the thinking portion of nature. He is the portion that thinks, in your understanding of that term. He therefore adds a different kind of mental organization, and organization then that nature requires, anticipates, and desires. Animals do not read or write books, but they do read nature directly through the context of their own experience and through intuitive knowing. Man's reasoning mind adds an atmosphere to nature that is as real, say, as the Van Allen belts or radiation fields that surround the Earth. The thinking mind, to a large degree, directs the activity of great spontaneous forces with energy cellular organization being, say, the captain of the body's great energy sources. The reasoning mind makes judgments and deals with the physical objects of the world as well as the cultural interpretations current in its time. Think of your own government in ideal terms for a moment. Its citizens are all individuals with their own lives and interests. The government, if it has their loyalty, utilizes their energies in such a way that the majority are benefited, as is the government itself. Yet, you cannot really put your finger on the government, though you might mention the White House as the seat of its power. The government is composed of many people, of course, and really extends all the way down the line, even to its least citizen. But the government can direct the use of energies, of goods, commerce, power, and so forth. People count on the government to realistically define the conditions of the world, to have proper intelligence so that the activities in foreign lands are known, to keep up proper communication with other governments, and so forth. Now, in some important respects, the reasoning mind is like the government in this analogy. If the people in power are paranoid, they overestimate the dangers of any given world situation. They overreact or overmobilize, using a disproportionate amount of energy and time for defense, taking energy away from other projects. The reasoning mind acts in the same fashion when paranoid beliefs are in power. It, therefore, tells all the citizens or cells of the body to mobilize for action, to be on alert, to pare down all but necessary activities, and so forth. When the government is paranoid, it begins to cut down on the freedom of its people or to frown upon behavior, and freer times would be acceptable. The same applies to the conscious mind in that situation. Now, the people might finally revolt, or they will take certain steps to see that their freedom is restored, and so the body's cells will do the same. So what we want, obviously, is to ensure that the conscious mind with its reasoning processes can make proper adjustments about the nature of the world and the individual citizens within it. Man's mind is really more of a process. It's not a complicated thing like an arm or leg, but a relationship and a process. That process has its source in what I can only call natural reasoning. You are given far more knowledge than you realize when you are born, for example. I am not speaking of genetic information alone as you understand it, but of a natural yet intuitive reasoning process that is the result of the relationships that exist among all portions of the body. This is the kind of reasoning that is the source from which thinking emerges, and you might think of it as magical reasoning. Each creature is born trusting. There is no such thing as a killer instinct with the implications and meaning that man gives that term. At levels almost impossible to describe in your adulthoods, all infants, for example, know that they are born into the environmental niches that suit them and no others, that are tailored to their requirements. You can usually see in a superficial fashion how animals under natural conditions fit into their environment so perfectly so that their needs, desires, and equipment meet and merge with the characteristics of the environment. It is not nearly as easy to see that the same applies to man and his mental and physical environment, his town or country or culture, but the infant trusts from the very first moment. You may not consider trust as an attribute connected with reasoning, but it is indeed, for it represents the creature's innate understanding of the support with which it has been gifted. The natural person still feels that trust. There are many books written about occult knowledge or magical knowledge. Most of them are filled with distortions, but they are all efforts to uncover man's natural, magical reasoning. I will also have more to say on that subject later. Now, had Rupert gone to a doctor or a faith healer when we began our last group of sessions, and then in a matter of a week or so found himself able again to walk with his table across the kitchen floor some 13 or 14 steps perhaps, where before 3 were his uncomfortable limit, he might have attributed the improvement to a doctor's treatment or to a faith healer's ability. But he would have been impressed. He would have been impressed also with the greater obvious motion of his feet, the feelings of release in the legs now spreading to the back and shoulders. Those improvements came about in their way magically because he has begun to use and understand this material. So let him be just as impressed, in fact, more impressed at the body's natural healing processes that will naturally flow and are naturally flowing when he allows himself to trust his life and the support of his own being. Work with the sessions of late, for again, it is your understanding that sets it all into motion. There are changes in the hips occurring and remarkable improvements already in the works. They must be allowed to happen, however, and that takes place as your understanding brings you in greater correspondence with the natural energy that is always your own. I bid you a fond, and again, magical evening. That marks the end of Seth Speaks, the magical approach, and this was our part 11. If you've enjoyed this reading, please consider giving it a like, sharing with a friend, and of course subscribing for more. Don't forget to check out the summary, the extended summary that accompanies this particular video coming out very, very soon. I'll leave a link in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I am Tony Victory A. Wolf Uncaged. Until the next time, have a magical evening. Have a magical day. Have a magical life.